All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another RD Buzz where we go over all things real estate, recreation, restaurants in the Raleigh and Durham area. I hope y'all had a good week so far. We got a lot to cover tonight, so we're just going to hit the ground running. The first thing I want to go over is a development. Now this development was announced a while ago for Cary. But a couple of things have lined up, and it looks like construction will start in 2026. Um, and this is already in a part of Cary where not that there's much of Cary that's not developed, but this is already in a part of Cary where there's a substantial commercial development that's literally across the street. So if you've ever been to Parkside Town Commons in Cary, this is the part of Cary that borders Durham. So it's a great area of Cary if you want to live in Cary, but you work in Durham. And there's really large commercial development there called Parkside Town Commons. It's got places like Hobby Lobby, Target, Chick-fil-A. If Cindy was here, she would always mention Chick-fil-A. But anyway, there's a lot of commercial development already there. This is going to go literally right across the street from it. The name of this development is going to be Alston Yards. I'll scroll down here so y'all can see. So this is Parkside Town Commons right here. You see the Chick-fil-A, the Chewy's, the Hobby Lobby. And then this green space is going to be this new development that's going to be breaking ground next year. It looks like it's mainly going to be apartments and office spaces. So when I'm looking at this, it says when it's complete, Alston Yards will have 950 apartments, 60,000 square feet of retail space, which isn't substantial, but there's not a lot to add to that area, honestly. I mean, again, you've got Starbucks, you've got a Target, you've got a Harris Teeter grocery store. So you already have a lot across the street. So, 60,000 square feet of retail space is not substantial, but there's not a lot to add to this area. And they're going to have 200,000 square feet of office space and looks like a hotel with up to 200 rooms. But I mean, this is a pretty substantial development, especially just from the apartments alone and the office space alone. 200,000 square feet of office and almost 1,000 apartments. But this part of Cary is really ideal, especially for those who work in Durham, but maybe they want to live in Cary for whatever reason, and they want to have really quick access to Durham. So you kind of scroll out here a little bit, you can kind of see how it lines up. So right up here, you've got RTP area. So this is pretty close to where the proposed Apple campus is going to go as well, which may be part of the reason of developing that land. Obviously, Apple has delayed the construction of that campus. There hasn't been any details sent out since that delay that occurred last year. But then you're right by 540 as well. So you can hop down south pretty quickly or head into the airport or North Raleigh pretty quickly as well. So it's just it's a prime location. So anyway, so they're going to be breaking ground next year. And I think it said on here the delivery. Okay, so the first phase will deliver mid 2027, and then it will take another 4 years to develop the remaining part of the development. So, but anyway, this like Parkside Town Commons is a really neat area, just because it has so much there, and so adding some apartment complexes in that area and some more office space and some more retail space is a really good thing. But this part of, just to kind of zoom out a little bit more so you can kind of see. So obviously, if you're looking at a map, you kind of see like the main heart of Cary here. So this is like the north west side of Cary. You might hear us in some of our videos talk a lot about an Amberley or a Cary Park neighborhood. So this isn't too far from those locations. If you live in those areas, there's a decent chance you might be shopping in the Parkside Town Commons shopping center. So, but anyway, look for this to start going vertical sometime next year, and look for some apartments to come online sometime in 2027. So I'm gonna click out. I have so many news stories that my computer is so slow. I have like all these tabs open, so I have to like close them out as we go tonight. Um, so the next one is kind of interesting. Apparently, Forbes does a list every single year. Um, it's like a travel guide list, and it's different areas to check out throughout the world. And it has, I think, 2,000 locations. And I think 200 or so of those are restaurants, and a couple of restaurants in North Carolina made the list. Um, so I was going to walk through, and a few of those are in our region. Some are in Charlotte, some are in Asheville, but there's a few that are here in our region. So Herons in Cary, and I think that is the only I think it's the only 5-star restaurant in our region. This is the one that's in Umstead and Umstead Hotel and Spa. But that one made the list. And let me know in the comments below if you've ever eaten it. I've never eaten at a single one of these that we're going to name. So you've got Herons and Cary that made the list. It's the restaurant in the Umstead Hotel and Spa. The Farrington House in Pittsburgh made the list. So if you've never been to this development that the Farrington House is in, it's really amazing. Honestly, it's kind of it feels like a movie, for lack of a better way to describe it. It's this little village with a working farm, and especially during like the fall time when the leaves are changing colors. It's just a really beautiful area. But anyway, there's a restaurant there. Again, never eaten at it, but it looks really wonderful. It's a beautiful area. If you're in Chapel Hill and you're heading south towards the Pittsburgh area, you'll drive past this particular region. But the Farrington House in Pittsburgh made it, and then Fairview Dining Room in Durham also made it, and that's in the Washington Duke Inn, which is a hotel and a golf course located on Duke's campus. It's a really beautiful area as well. So 3 restaurants in our region made the Forbes list of essentially places to visit throughout the world, which is pretty cool. Other restaurants that made it, I'm going to share the screen so y'all can actually see what I'm seeing here as I talk about these. The Gallery restaurant in Charlotte, know nothing about that. The dining room Inn on the Biltmore Estate. So this is a place we always tell folks to visit if they're coming into town, because some folks, they'll come into town and rightly so, they'll allocate some time to spend in the mountains, allocate some time to spend at the beach, just to get a feel for the area and the state. And a lot of times, one of the places on the list for folks to explore when they come into town is Asheville. And in Asheville is this place called the Biltmore Estate, which is just this massive property in Asheville. I mean, if you look at pictures of it, like if you've never heard of it, you should just Google it, because it's pretty mind blowing, honestly. But it's just this huge house. You can do tours of the house. My opinion of the Biltmore Estate, after because there's like 100 rooms, and after probably the 5th or 6th room, it gets kind of boring, to be honest. But it is like the grounds of the Biltmore Estate are really beautiful. So I'm not surprised that their restaurant made the list as well. But yeah, 3 restaurants in the Raleigh area made this Forbes travel guide list, which is pretty cool, I think. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever tried any of these. So, all right, heading on to the next story. And this next story is kind of a theme that I've noticed over the last couple weeks. So there is a joint medical venture between Duke and Wake Med. So when I say a theme, there was announced a couple weeks ago a joint medical venture between UNC and Duke Systems for a children's hospital in there, which I really think is kind of an underrated story. That's a really big deal. And just I mean, if you're looking at it from like a medical standpoint, it's a huge deal. It's the only children's hospital that's going to be in North Carolina. And if you're looking at it from like an economic standpoint, I mean, the number of folks that hospital is going to employ, it's an underrated story. That's a really big deal coming to our area. But this is a much smaller facility. This is a rehabilitation center, joint venture between Duke and WakeMed. I love these joint ventures. I mean, these are competitors at the end of the day. Duke, UNC, WakeMed, they're competing healthcare systems in our area. And I love it when they're coming together to put together these very specific health facilities. So this one's going to be targeting folks, and it just opened. This was announced several years ago, but it just opened. It's going to be a 52-bed hospital that basically exists to treat folks who have had traumatic injuries, whether they're amputees or traumatic brain injuries, stroke victims. And so this facility is going to exist to rehabilitate those folks back into normal life. And it looks like a pretty neat facility. It's got pickleball courts, like things to help, I guess, build up their strength and their ability to I guess to be active. But I do love, the reason I wanted to highlight this is I love these joint ventures that are occurring, because we do have in our area, I think, some of the best healthcare that you can find really nationwide, between the Duke system, the UNC system, the WakeMed system, and some of these joint ventures that are coming online, whether it's this rehabilitation center or the children's hospital, really just take our area to the next level as far as what healthcare looks like here. And I think, facilities like this are part of the reason why, if you look at the demographics that are really growing in our area, one of those demographics that's growing significantly is the 65 plus demographic, and a lot of this goes back to healthcare. We have really great healthcare here, and so the more facilities like this that get built throughout the area, I think better for the area in general. So I love that it has a pickleball court. I think that's really cool. It's probably needed for rehabilitating some of those medical issues. So all right, moving on to the next story, getting a little bit more into some real estate specific topics here. So it looks like there were about 100 acres sold in Knightdale to the Pulte Group. There's not a lot of details about what the neighborhood will look like, really anything about the neighborhood whatsoever. But Pulte now owns roughly 100 acres in Knightdale. I'll share the screen here so y'all can see where it's going to be located. So at some point down the line, we'll definitely get details on what this is going to look like. So it's going to be right in this area. The map, man, my computer is just so slow. Normally there's like a little bar here that I can kind of toggle out. But basically down here, if I were to zoom this map out, down here is where a lot of the commercial development is in Knightdale. So there it is. Places like your Target and your Walmart. Here we go. Let's zoom out. Yeah, I have so many tabs. Have you ever met those people that, and this like stresses me out? Have you ever, and maybe you're one of those people where they open up their computer and they have like 100 tabs pulled up? It stresses me out. I can't do that. And it slows my computer down. But anyway, so you got Knightdale Station here. That's the Knightdale Station Park. This is the Knightdale Station neighborhood. And then you've got the commercial development that's kind of right along these lines, and the neighborhood is going to be a little bit further up. So, but anyway, I think that side of town, I mean, it's kind of getting into like, it's apparently a Knightdale address, but it's getting into, like, if you're looking at a map, it's going to look more like northeast Raleigh. That's an area that's going to get developed a lot over the next several years. If I could zoom out, I could show you more. But in general, just up here as you're heading north in Knightdale, kind of northeast Raleigh into like the Rollsville area, there's going to be a lot of development that happens up there over the next decade or so because there's a lot of space to develop. And so you're going to see this area up there change pretty significantly, to be honest. And this neighborhood at 100 acres is going to be one of those. So speaking of Pulte, this is actually really fascinating. So the Triangle Business Journal put out a list of the top builders by volume in the Triangle, and the winner was Lennar. When I say top, I mean by sales volume. And really, like if you live in the area, that probably comes as no surprise whatsoever because you probably see Lennar neighborhoods going up everywhere. And so when I see this list, it comes at no surprise due to just how often I see new Lennar neighborhoods or just the size of Lennar neighborhoods. Lennar neighborhoods tend to be, hundreds up to 1,000 homes at a time. And so, there's a lot of volume that they produce. But it looks like in 2024, Lennar closed $1.1 billion worth of homes. That was just over 2,800 homes. And the next closest was Pulte. And when I say next closest, they were way behind of what Lennar did. Pulte did $569 million worth of closings at around just over 1,200 homes. But that's pretty crazy. Lennar is just doing substantially more business in our area than really any other builder. They have it ranked here: Lennar, Pulte Group, and then D.R. Horton. But again, you see this. You see, like when I'm doing searches for folks looking at new construction, Lennar, Pulte, D.R. Horton, those are builders that are coming up repeatedly throughout the process. Because those are builders that are just doing a lot of business in our area. But Lennar is leading the pack pretty significantly. So I think that'll continue. I mean, Lennar still has a lot of really large neighborhoods that are in the pipeline or that they're just currently building in. And so I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. If you don't like those builders, there's plenty of other builders out there in our region too that are just doing less volume. But you can find plenty of other builders other than these three if you didn't want to work with a Lennar or Pulte or D.R. Horton. So there's obviously there's a pretty big price difference between D.R. Horton and Lennar and Pulte as well. So all that kind of plays into it as well. What the budget and the type of, the size of home you're looking for, all those kind of factors. But anyway, I just thought that was interesting. But it's something that you clearly see when you're driving around the area, how much Lennar is building. So, all right, moving on a little further into some real estate specific topics. So we've talked a lot over the last several weeks about the difference between what Zillow was projecting nationwide and what Moody's was projecting nationwide. Zillow was projecting 2.9% price growth, and Moody's was projecting prices to fall a very small amount, but still prices to fall nationally. So Zillow on the 19th of this month, 19th of February, has downgraded their projection for price growth this year. So it was, just as I said, 2.9%. Now they're expecting prices to increase by 0.9%. So that's a 2% decrease in what they were originally expecting. And a lot of this just has to do with interest rates at the end of the day, or mortgage rates specifically, and the thought process that mortgage rates are going to remain higher for longer. I didn't pull up the article, so I'm hoping I get this right, but I think it was Fannie Mae just came out with a projection of mortgage rates for the remainder of this year and even into next year. And if I remember the article correctly, they also cited mortgage mortgage bankers association, and the expectation is that mortgage rates will not go below 6.5% this year and next year, which again is not that surprising if you've been following mortgage rates for a while. And I think when some of these projections started happening, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I think there was just this kind of overall positive projection of where mortgage rates would be. We'd be back in the fives rather quickly. But it's much more of a pessimistic view of mortgage rates now than it was. And I say pessimistic. I think, you could probably replace that with realistic. It's just a more realistic view of where mortgage rates will be this year and next year. So anyway, so all that ties into the reason I bring all that up is it ties into Zillow's projections of what's going to happen to prices nationally. So one thing I don't have is, when I talked about this several weeks ago, we had the really nice chart that that Resi Club had put together. I don't have that with these new projections. So I'm not sure how they're breaking down from like a metro level, because obviously national is not always applicable to what we see on the local level. I know when we were looking at this a couple months ago, that 2.9%. Both Raleigh and Durham were outpacing that, according to Zillow, as far as what their projection was. And I would assume if we had a local map, we would also be outpacing the 0.9%. But that's a pretty substantial decrease to go from 2.9% to a 9% price increase. So it will be interesting to see what happens. But I think in general, kind of the expectation right now is mortgage rates are going to continue to really dampen the buyer demand in the market. And there was an interesting, and maybe we'll cover it next week, because next week we'll have the February data out, so we can kind of dig into to what that looks like. But it was an interesting article in Housing Wire that was essentially asking the question: is 2025 the last year that we'll see inventory levels below pre-pandemic levels? So in other words, are inventory levels in every single state going to increase to the level that they were before the pandemic? And is this the last year we'll see them below that number? And so I think that's an interesting question. And I think for our area, I think there's a possibility that it could be that 2025 could be the last year, and we could see substantial inventory growth in our region. So anyways, I'm excited to see the data come out for February, because we saw some pretty big jumps in January, both from like a whole area standpoint, and then kind of niching it down to a much more local level. We saw some pretty big jumps in inventory levels compared to where we were last January. So anyway, so we'll dig into that. But Zillow has downgraded their price projections, and this kind of ties into it. So this is an interesting article that Resi Club put together. So I'm going to click on this and share the screen. So this is also data from Zillow. They just put it in a format that's a little more readable. This is really fascinating stuff. So this starts in 2020. What was the salary you needed, the average salary you needed in order to purchase a typical house in the United States? And in January of 2020, that was $51,000. In January of 2025, it's $92,000. That's insane. I mean, it's just truly insane. And Zillow, at least according to right here, they put the methodology. It's assuming a 20% down payment, and a lot of folks aren't doing a 20% down payment. A lot of folks are doing less than that, and so these numbers, kind of shift a little bit based on that. I mean that's a pretty generous down payment, 20%. Not a lot of folks are doing 20% down payments. So that's a 79% shift in 5 years. The biggest jump was from 2022 at 62,000 to 2023 at 86,000. That's crazy. I mean, it's a $20,000 salary jump in 1 year needed in order to purchase a typical home in the US. So if you go down, and this is why the housing market in a lot of areas is starting to move slower. Buyer demand is less, inventory is building, because of this, because of the salary needed in order to purchase a home. It's just not affordable for a lot of folks. I do want to click on this map because it's kind of fascinating. This is more of the local level here. Then I'll zoom in. There we go. All right, so if you look at the Raleigh Metro, I'm assuming this is the Raleigh-Cary Metro, and then Durham's probably the Durham-Chapel Hill Metro. So January 2019, 60,000 is what was needed. January 2025, 116,000 is what's needed. Again, this is based on a mortgage with a 20% down payment, and then no more than, I think it was 30, I think it was, what was it, 30% of the home buyer spends less than 30% of their monthly income on the total monthly payment. So that's the methodology in this. And in Durham, we went from 56,000 in 2019 to 107,000 in 2025. It's just crazy. I mean, it's just the jump in that is just wild. So this is all this ties back to the conditions of the housing market. And we are, I mean, the housing market so far this year has been pretty competitive. We've gotten personally in a lot of multiple offer situations. And it is a competitive market, but some of that has to do with just the time of year. And I think as long as rates remain on the higher end, and prices remain stable, I think we'll probably, this is my expectation, we'll be in a very similar scenario as we were last year, where the first few months of the year were really hot. There's this large wave of initial buyers that hits the market. That's just tired of waiting. They want to buy a house. Rates are what they are. They're going to buy. They've accepted that reality. And then that kind of wave of buyers fizzles out. And then the latter half of the year, you just end up in a much slower market. And so I do think that's, if I had to guess, that's a very similar market to what we'll experience this year, because it's what we experienced last year. So I think the competition we're experiencing now is just very, it's just seasonal. It's seasonal competition. So, and there's always competition at the end of the day. If you have a really unique house in a really great area and is well maintained, your house is going to be competitive probably no matter what the market is. But just generally speaking, the market is competitive right now. But that, this income piece is just wild to me. A 79% increase from 2020 to 2025. I mean, that really tells you everything you really need to know about the housing market, and the place that it's in right now from an affordability standpoint. So, kind of tying all of this together is markets where home buyers have gained the most power. And all of this really, at the end of the day, has to do with inventory, or the inventory levels above where demand is, essentially. And not a single North Carolina town is on this list. There's a lot of Texas. There's a lot of Florida. There's a little bit of South Carolina. You see Myrtle Beach on here. You see Spartanburg on here. I don't think I saw Charleston on here. I think those were the only two South Carolina locations, but no location in North Carolina is on the list. At the end of this year, will there be one on the list? Possibly. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see. But in general, our state is a little more of a hotter market than what we're seeing in places like Florida and Texas, where inventory levels have just increased to such a high level that it's, demand just isn't there to keep up with it. So, but yeah, man, we blazed through these. I was thinking this was going to be a little bit longer of a podcast this week with the amount of topics we had, but Next week, we'll be digging into the February data. So we'll get the February data probably over the weekend. We can dig into that and kind of look at what, inventory has looked like in February, and just kind of get a decent picture of the housing market from a data perspective. But anyway, I appreciate y'all tuning in. Next week is March. March is one of my favorite months of the year because you finally get out of February. February is probably my least favorite month of the year. And like, in our yard, we're already having like some flowers bloom. I just love it. I love it. Springtime is coming. Warm weather is coming. It is almost here. But anyway, I hope y'all have a good weekend, and we will see y'all next week. Oh, yeah, make sure to put in the comments where you're joining from. I always forget to mention this, where you're joining from. And also drop some questions in there. If you got questions you want me to cover next week, drop those in there, and I'll get to those next week. But anyway, I hope y'all have a good weekend, and see y'all next time.